Rob Zombie's 7th studio album, The Lunar Injection Kool-Aid Eclipse Conspiracy, was released March 12th on Nuclear Blast Records. Does this album really hold up in today's metal scene? Or does it feel like a dated love letter to a genre that faded away almost 20 years ago? I'm Benfo, and this is Metal Forge Reviews. Rob Zombie has a long and storied career in the metal scene. One only has to look back to the mid-80s with White Zombie and the enormous impact that band had on the American metal and industrial music scene. Since the late 90s, Rob has done his own thing between directing horror movies, doing voice acting, and releasing music under his own solo act. Unsurprisingly, this record feels more akin to a sideshow act. It doesn't feel narrative-driven, it's more random and chaotic, like you're wandering narrow corridors inside a funhouse that might murder you. It reminds me of a hip-hop album too, with minute-long interludes or short filler songs before you get to the more fleshed-out tracks on the record. That doesn't really sit with me. I like a consistent atmosphere, and this is probably why I never really got into Rob Zombie's albums per se. I've always enjoyed his music, but most of my exposure to his music has been through mixed CDs and playlists. I'm gonna give the atmosphere and vibe a 2.5 out of 5. I don't hate it, but I'm not gonna play this album from front to back. I'm into the album art. It's cool. It has a very retro, psychedelic-inspired comic book feel. And as I was doing some research on the album, I came across a lot of really cool merchandise that's being released in support of the album. I love that art style, and if I considered myself a big fan of Zombie, I would absolutely want to get my hands on some of those items. Lyrically, I don't expect much from Rob Zombie's records. It's not that type of music, and if he has intended it to be, then I guess the joke is on me, because I'm completely missing out on those identifiers. Lines like Ramalama, Ramalama-loo, and Dig It, Sexy Mama, I'm a Cemetery Man don't really engage me, so I tend to just tune them out. The artwork and merchandise really push this category over the top into a more favorable score, so I give it a 3.5 out of 5. Despite the vibe being a bit chaotic and carnival-esque for me, there are some brilliant songs in this record. The Triumph of King Freak, The Eternal Struggles of the Howling Man, Boom Boom Boom, and Crow Killer all stood out to me as very well-written songs with fantastic riffs. As a vocalist, Rob has a very characteristic, gruff sort of shout to his delivery, and for a fellow that's closing in on his 60s, I gotta say, he's definitely an inspiration for those of us who like to get shouty every once in a while. His patterns do get a bit predictable, and the lyrics, as noted before, are a bit cringy, but I don't think this detracts from the overall quality of the composition of the songs. As some of our Forge mates pointed out in our community poll, which we will get to shortly, this album does mark the return of John 5, a legendary guitar player, and I would say that his presence certainly benefited this album overall. There's some great songs on here, and as far as the fleshed out full songs go, compositions are great, so I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5. The production really shines on this record. Rob has access to some of the finest names in the industry, and he has chosen to go with one of the biggest names in American producers, Zeus. As far as the band goes, the guitar tone sounds like it did just from the 80s, that chunky, scooped sound that defined industrial metal. The drums are in your face. Zombie sounds like he's in the room with you, and there's nowhere to run as he shouts "Ramalama-loo" at you. Sonically, there's a ton going on with a variety of ethnic instruments, movie clips, record scratches, synths, etc. I have to applaud Zombie, Zeus, and all the players and staff on this one because it's modern without sounding overly polished and digitally manipulated. The production on this record is outstanding. It gets a 4.5 out of 5. In community feedback, let's take a look at what you all had to say about Rob Zombie's latest album. While we do not count this towards my score, we are always very interested in seeing what you have to say. Thank you for all your comments, feedback, and insight because you definitely helped to make this video. All right, when you tally up my scores, the final verdict comes out to be a 3.6. I think this is a very fair score for this album. It didn't entirely titillate me, but I don't want to entirely dismiss it either. Right out of the gate, I wanted to give it a 3 out of 5, but I think that there's a lot of substance behind the composition of the heavier songs, the production value, and the overall themes presented with the record in conjunction with the merchandise that came out with it. So I think 3.6 is a fair score, and I'm sticking to it. Thank you for sticking with this video. I am Benfo. Thank you for liking, commenting, and subscribing. You guys are the best. Be well, Forge on, friends. Go with the gods.